Hello, welcome to this conversation. This is a conversation about our life, about stories, about your stories, and might be sort of like tea time or coffee time, but we don't have any tea and we don't have any coffee, but we have a good conversationalist, a longtime friend, Edwin James, and he's going to be with us today. So, Ed, we welcome you. You've been around for a few years in this community, right?
Yeah, not all my life yet.
Not all your life yet.
No.
And you've lived in Shoreham most of that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go back how many generations?
How many generations? My family
Your family?
goes back to the 1760s
Okay.
when they came to Weybridge and settled there from Massachusetts. And so,
Do you have a family story that you particularly remember that?
well, there was one generation of them, of James's, that there were three doctors in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was Dr. Edwin James, who went with Major Long's expedition into the West.
Mm-hmm.
He was a botanist and a medical doctor. He was a doctor for the expedition, and so he's kind of famous. He was the first white man to climb Pikes Peak, and they called it James Peak for many years, and still is on old maps, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of a famous guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so yeah, I come down from. There was a William James, who was my great grandfather, and he married a young lady named Salome Hurd. Well, she died either during or after childbirth, and she gave birth to Curtis James. Well, from Curtis James went down into the Peat family in Cornwall eventually. And so what am I trying to say? Just discovered her tombstone. It's in a neighbor's cellar, I guess, and was picked out. But anyway, let's see. And then after Salome died, he married a Payne, so we're related to the Paynes. And then he had 9 more children. And my grandfather, Charles James, was the youngest of 9 children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where I come from, in Weybridge. So.
I remember your father.
Yes.
And had good times talking with him.
Oh yeah.
And loved his woodwork.
Oh yes.
And can you tell us a story or two about your dad?
Loved woodworking. That was his main thing in life. He farmed. He bought this old rundown farm in Shoreham in 1937, and had to build a barn. He milked his cows outdoors for a while because he had no barn. And he finally constructed a barn. He moved an old barn in and added to it, and so he farmed there for quite a long time and raised us boys and girls. And let's see, but his love of woodworking was the main thing in his life. That was what he wanted to do, and ended up, after he retired from farming, he did go into woodworking. He established a shop in his house and got woodworking equipment and built chests and tables and did very good work. He was trained in woodworking at Randolph when he went to school over there. Because back then, you did 2 years of high school in Middlebury, and then you went to Randolph to finish the last 2. And that's what he did. And then in Randolph, he learned the technology of fine woodworking. So that's what he did.
Was he the first one to create a sawmill? Because I know I connect sawmills with your family.
When I get out of mechanic school, he and I bought a sawmill. It was in Shoreham. And I still have it. I still use it. I've changed places with it, but I still do custom work, and I sell a little lumber, not very much. It's more of a hobby than anything, but I do custom work if somebody wants some logs sawn. I do logging too, a little bit, and so my own stuff. I'm very fortunate he left me land that has some valuable pine on it, big pine, and so Yeah, that's so. This spring I was logging and cut some big pine. You know, pine that you get 16, 18 inches of boards.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a big tree for that, and in the process dropped one on my tractor, which spoiled that. Broke my heart, but
You broke your tractor, dropped it
Yeah.
right on your tractor?
well, yeah, I thought I parked it far enough away, but it wasn't quite. It was 12 feet too close, and came down and crushed it. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's a terrible story. Shouldn't
yeah.
laugh. Shouldn't laugh about that.
no, but I
But
love
you're
that
gonna
tractor.
laugh.
I love that tractor. Yeah. Well, luckily I wasn't on the tractor, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and your son does some,
My son is a
is a little
high-tech diesel mechanic. He has a shop
okay.
on what was part of the farm.
Right.
And we gave him some land, 5 acres, so he has a shop there.
Right.
He's a great welder and a fabricator, and he does over-the-road trucks, tractor-trailer, diesels. He's a great diesel mechanic. He knows what to do,
Mm-hmm.
and he rigged up a diesel engine for my sawmill. So it's when my sawmill is like getting in your car and starting it and starting the saw. It's easy.
Right.
You know, it used to be kind of hard.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but so yeah.
So your
busy.
family has had a long time here, and you
Yeah.
know about the stories of lots of people in the community and
Mhm.
your story. So when did you see yourself as a storyteller? Because you write.
I do write, yeah. I farmed for 30 years, milked cows for 30 years. My wife couldn't help me. I worked alone all the time for those years. I had 50 cows, 300 acres of land. In the summer, I would hire a young high school boy to handle bales for me and unload the wagons and put them on the elevator, and I'd mow it away. And so we did that for 30 years, and then I sold my cows. It was a hard decision, but I hadn't had a day off in 7 years. And then I sat down and started writing. I had some time to myself, and I wrote some poetry. And I have a little book of poetry, and I have 4 or 5 little booklets that I self-published, which I need to have reprinted. And let's see, and then I found some employment up in Shelburne. And but yeah, I was a poor student in high school. I don't know how I graduated, but I did. I guess they were glad to get rid of me or something. I did get along with people, but so I never knew I could write, you know. But anybody can. I tell people there's a story in every pair of shoes.
A story in every pair of shoes.
Yeah.
I like that line.
And the memories don't go with the farm. I walk every morning. I look down across the meadow.
Mm-hmm.
And how did we do it?
And the memories are there.
Yeah.
Right. And ready for you to tell stories.
Yeah. So I write stories about people. I had some interesting neighbors. I wish I knew more about more people, but I don't. So I find
Mhm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting hobby, and I keep a journal every morning and write down my thoughts and what I'm going to do for the day or what I did yesterday. And it doesn't amount to much, but I like the actual activity of writing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun for me.
Yeah.
It's artistic. I do sketch too, so my little stories sometimes have sketches in them. And
That takes some time and gives
Yeah,
you
a little
gives
bit.
you a chance to be
especially,
be
yeah.
quiet and
Yeah.
be focused.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yesterday, for instance, my thoughts turned to our country and how it is, how we perceive it, and it is my impression that our country is the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've always heard about the promised land. Well, I think our country is, with the freedoms and the opportunities and the responsibilities. We have to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I pray that our younger generations coming up will see this and promote these ideas.
And you write about these thoughts as well?
Yeah.
You still do poetry?
Not too much, you know. I'm more apt to write a story or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
I read your story about the airplane in Russia.
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I finished farming, I had part of a summer to relax a little bit, and I got a job at Shelburne Airport as a pilot mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked there 10 years. I'll have to back up a little because after high school I went to a mechanic school down near Boston, down at Bedford Airport, and got my A&P licenses, which is a license to work on engines and airframes of aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to Shelburne and I did that for 10 years. And I met a man up there. His name was George Coy, and he's an adventurer if I ever saw one. No grass goes under his feet. And he was trading with the Russians, Russian people, in these trainers that the Russians built. They were called Yak-52s. And they were two-passenger and had a big radial engine with lots of horsepower. And so I used to work on those. And he decided that he wanted to own the biggest biplane in the world, which is called AN-2. It has 1,000 horsepower and 2 wings, is a biplane.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds about 10 people. And so he, through his contracts, he contacted some people in Lithuania. And they had one for sale. And so we boxed up 2 Cessnas, a small one and a big one, 150 and 172, and put them in a box and shipped them over to Hungary. And then we followed them over and reassembled them. And in Budapest. Budapest is 2 cities, Buda and Pest. There's a river in between. And so it took us all day to fly from Budapest to Kaunas, Lithuania. And there we went to a 400-acre airfield. And there were no landing strips. It was just you took off whichever way the wind was, that's what you used.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a huge, huge hangar there. And over there they use sailplanes because they can't afford fuel. So they have either a cable launcher or another airplane tows up a glider. And they fly in gliders. Well, they had this Antonov. It was way back there must have been 40 or 50 gliders in the floor. And they take up a lot of room because the wings are long. And this Antonov, as huge as it was way back in the corner. I still can see it way back in there. And so we hauled that out and had a new engine and new covering. It was because the wings are fabric covered. The rest of it's metal. And we put a transponder in it, and let's see what else we put in it. Some radios, I think. And a fuel tank that held 1,200 liters. Well, the plane itself holds 1,200 liters, so we had twice the fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And this big fuel tank sat upon these seats that are doubled down, and we strapped it down. So our point of no return was our point of departure. So we could go all the way to wherever we were going and all the way back. Because there is a point of no return where you run out of fuel and you can't go back. But we had enough so we could go all the way to where we were going and back if we had to. Because up in the North Country, they close down the airports at 8 o'clock. It's light all night that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
But they shut things down up there at 8 o'clock at night. So you had to get there before 8. And so anyway, we started out from Lithuania, and the first night we stayed in Aalborg, Denmark. And the bath water was greenish, it was beautiful and warm. Our first warm shower leaving Lithuania, there wasn't any warm water there. And the next day we started out for the Shetland Islands. And we got to the Shetland Islands, took us all day, and we noticed the bottom of the airplane was covered with oil. Well, we had to find out where that was coming from, which we didn't. So they filled it up and headed for Iceland in the middle of the night. We left before, had to leave before 8 o'clock, so we left before 8 o'clock. We flew probably until about midnight, and then the oil pressure disappeared.
Mm.
Not good. So we limped along and not knowing how long the engine would run. And George, Mr. Coy was using GPS. So it took us to the nearest airport, which is Hoffen, Iceland, on the east coast of Iceland. And we got our life raft ready. You know, it was bound up. We unbound it. We put on life suits, dry suits, and paddled along. And I was looking out the window. I wasn't flying. I didn't. And I saw a hole in the clouds and some land down below. And down through the hole we went and landed in Hoffen. And the police came and took us to a ride, gave us a ride to the local hotel where we stayed at night. And so we were lucky to make it, because we ran about an hour without any oil pressure.
Mm.
But the Russian engines are derated. Like this engine in an American plane would have been 1,200 horsepower. Well, it's derated, so there wasn't the stress on it. Would have been if it had the full horsepower, and so I guess that saved us. And whatever. But it was quite a story. And then we left the plane in Iceland and came home, and he ordered a new engine, and then we went back on the 4th of July, coming up, and replaced the engine. It took about a week, and then flew that home.
Flew that home.
Then the brand new engine went across 400 miles of ocean to Greenland, and landed in Greenland, stayed overnight, and then we went 400 miles more over water to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of tense.
Yes. I like the fact that all this was in a box. You know, you shipped it over in a box.
Yes.
And then you had to go up and
the red tape to get it out of that box, to get it, to get it into. It came into, I think it came into Holland or someplace, maybe Germany. And then it had to be shipped to Budapest.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took quite a while to get it released from the shipping places. And after it got to Budapest, we had quite a time getting it out of the yard where it was put over to the airfield.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we got the airfield in, everything opened up. It was fine. Yeah. So it was quite an adventure for an old farmer that never been anywhere. And so
So remember what year was that?
93.
93. Okay.
And the Russians were just leaving Lithuania. They'd been there for a long time.
Okay.
And they had camps around, but they didn't do anything. They had guns, but they were still guarding entrances, but they didn't do anything. I remember one guard. I took gum and candy with me, and I gave one guard at the entrance of the airfield a handful of chewing gum. Well, he was thrilled. You don't have that. And everything they left over there was in shambles, these huge hangars that they built. The windows are broken, the doors are falling off. They weren't using them anymore. They didn't take care of anything. So it was kind of interesting. But the people were wonderful. They treated us royally, took us in their homes, and fed us. And it was amazing. So,
That's a great story.
Well, yeah.
And how long did it take you to write that?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, you just kept writing
just
it?
Right, yeah. After I came home.
After you came home.
I sat down.
Yeah.
A good thing, because I forget easily. So.
Yeah. What else have you written about in terms of stories?
A couple of neighbors that I grew up with. One was an old neighbor. I live on Doolittle Road, and he lived on the Doolittle farm. And his name was George Burchard, and he was an interesting character. And he's born on the farm. He was related to the Hemingways, which is an old family. I think his mother was a Hemingway. And George used to come and visit us every day. And he'd drive his tractor. He barely could drive. He was a horseman. He didn't drive cars very well, and his wife didn't either. It was just terrible. But anyway, he'd come over in his tractor, and he'd get the latest of the day and tell us what was going on in his family, his life. He never had any children. And he had some physical problems which eliminated him from doing any physical work. So he'd hire anybody to come along for 50 cents an hour to do the haying or whatever. And one of the interesting things about back then, there were gypsies that came through, and they came through in cars and wagons and whatever, and they'd always come to George's place because he had a spring down over the hill from the farm, and he would let them camp down there. And so that's where the gypsies would come and camp. And there were other stories about the gypsies too, but we'll leave that.
Yeah.
And but he would do that, and he'd always get somebody to drive his car. He'd want to go somewhere. He said, "Well, you drive my car. I'll pay half the way." You know. Or if he wanted some help, he'd say, "Well, when you get my age, I'll help you." You know. So he was a character. Yeah.
That's, and you said you also wrote some other stories about other neighbors?
Yeah, we had a neighbor who lived next door. He was, his name was Charlie. I named the story as Charlie. And Charlie was crippled with polio when he was young, and grew up in Cornwall, Cornwall, I think. And he never married, not for a long, long time. And he worked around. He had bees, kept bees. And he lives on next door, farm next to us, where they used to have cows. And he kept his bee equipment in his old stable, and along with all the memories.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally did get married. He was a bit of a gossip. He worked at the corner store, and he loved to tell stories. He wanted to know what's going on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would do that. And but when it came time for him to get married, he married a lady in Middlebury, and he wouldn't say much about it. So nobody knew what was going on until just about before he got married, and then things started changing. And he put a house up on the hill or the trailer. And he didn't live with his mother, and but he only lived a couple of years after he got married. He had a heart attack, and then another serious one, and he died. So. Nobody knows why he waited so long.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
It's great to meet people and be a part of their story, isn't it?
Yeah. There's another story I want to write, but I can't get the
Okay.
family together. I don't know if we've got time, but
Yeah, go ahead.
we had a neighbor that lived close by, and the family had 16 children in 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
One died at birth, and one was killed not too many years ago. So they're most of them are still alive,
Mm-hmm.
and they're around. And so I really want to know about this family. They interesting group, and the children are all, most of them are still alive and working in the area. And I'd like to know about their family and how old the house was. The house has been taken down since. You know, were they all born in the house, or what happened? You know,
That sounds like
who
a
took
good,
care of them?
That sounds like a good project.
It is, and I look forward to doing it. I've started it, but I've got to get the kids together
Right.
and get some names and so on and so forth. And
Well,
So-
it's good to have a project like that.
yeah,
And a story that people are willing to share and people
Yeah.
people will enjoy.
Yeah.
I remember the day that you and I went flying,
Oh,
and we were in this little plane,
yeah.
went over at the lake, and at one point you said, "Now you take it,"
Oh,
and
probably.
I said no, and you said yes.
Yeah.
So I did, and I made
Wasn't
made
hard.
every effort to keep it as steady as I possibly could.
Yeah,
And then when I gave it back to you, we came to a little airport,
yeah.
and you decided to take some. I don't know what you had a term for it, where you'd come down and come really close to landing and then pick up again.
A touch and go.
A touch and go.
Yep.
Okay, and you did touches and go, and I thought.
Waste of time, huh?
No, I thought, Ed, don't ask me to do that.
No, I wouldn't do that. No.
But here's what happened. I called my grandson up, my second grandson, and I said, "Thomas, do you know what I was doing today?" And he said, "No, Grandpa." I said, "I was flying an airplane."
Right.
And there was complete silence on the other end. And he said something like, "Oh, Grandpa, cool,
Yeah.
cool. And so you helped me get in good with my grandson
good.
because he thought that was so much fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like to take people, and I encourage them to take the controls because it's not hard. It's very delicate, and so you have to move it very
And
much.
so you've been flying though for how long?
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's another thing I never thought I would accomplish. You know, being as poor a student as I was, you know,
Hmm.
I have, and so I'm very fortunate to do so many things. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a great story.
Another thing I enjoy doing is singing. I sing with the gospel choir in Virginia's, and it's my 10th year with them, I think. And
Okay.
so we'll be singing at field days on the first night, 7 o'clock. We'll be singing in Shoreham at 7 o'clock on the 7th of August.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 6th of August, we'll be singing in Ripton at the community house, I think.
Mm.
So we have 25 to 30 people in the group this year, and so it changes every season.
Sure.
You know. It's usually less in the winter because people have to commute through terrible weather.
Do they come to rehearsal then?
Yeah, tonight is rehearsal.
Tonight's rehearsal?
Yeah, tonight is rehearsal at the Virginia's, where is it? The Gospel Reformed Church. You used to call it the Dutch Reformed Church. It's
Oh, yes.
up by Bub's
Sure.
Barn, up and back there.
Oh, yeah.
Great big
Right.
place. So we rehearse there. Tonight we won't be there. We'll be up to the Baptist Church just north of Virginia's.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Community, I can't remember the name of it.
Well, isn't that
Yeah.
great to be able
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be able to sing and to be able to tell stories, be able to fly, and
Yeah.
to,
I'm very
and,
fortunate.
and to
very
do some logging and
Yeah.
and to write.
Yeah.
One of the things we try to do with these conversations is just to sit and talk, and hear people's stories. And we thank you for sharing your
You're
story.
welcome. I hope it proves interesting to
Oh,
your audience.
What I know, what I'm hoping and know really is that out there is people watch us, and we have no idea what a big crowd we have. You know, we would invite them all to tea, but yeah. But we're really glad that we can do that, because then what we're hoping is that those of you who are listening and kind of just sitting in on this conversation, that you begin to think about your story.
Oh,
And
yes.
begin to think about, well, I've got a story
Yeah.
too. I've got
Yeah.
plenty of stories, and I should tell those stories. And my family and my friends have stories too, and I should listen to those stories. And we think it'll be a greater world
Oh, yeah.
if, in fact, we listen to each other and we tell each other
Right.
stories, because that's kind of at the heart of who we are.
Yeah.
And you've shared some of that today, and we deeply appreciate that.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, glad to. We're
As I say, there's a story in every pair of shoes. You
say that
mentioned
again.
There's a story in every pair of shoes.
A story in every pair of shoes. Now, I can imagine walking down the street
Yeah.
and seeing somebody and looking at their shoes, and then saying, "What's your story?"
Right.
But we won't ask them. But it would be so interesting to
Yes.
know.
You never know.
oh.
You never know.
Okay, we've had a good time, and we thank you for that.
Yes.
And we thank you out there for coming into this conversation, and we hope that you'll find ways to tell your story and to have your conversations with others, because that's what makes life a very, very rich thing. Thank you.